So today's webinar is actually a broader coalition effort for the folks that have been organizing for Salah, including the Adala Justice Project, American Muslims in Palestine, American for Justice in Palestine, CARE National, the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine, the Muslim American Society, the Muslim Women's Coalition, the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, the U.S. Palestinian Community Network, and there are many more, but these are the folks that, we were able to kind of rally to come together on such a short notice. So for today's agenda, let me see if I could go to the where we're at. We're just gonna hear a little bit from our executive director, Linda Sorsura, on why this moment matters. And she'll just kind of contextualize a little bit of what's been happening this past week and then what it means for us as a community since since Salah was detained in March. And then we're going to hear from Aya from the American Muslims for Palestine, who's a human rights advocate and a scholar who will just give us a little bit more context on Palestine organizing within the states. And then we're going to transition into doing our Power Hour function, which is taking an action together to call our elected officials. And we're just going to share, screen share, and just make sure that folks are able to take action together. And then next steps, we'll share on how to stay involved and how to kind of keep the momentum going on behalf of Salah and others that are being, being criminalized for speaking out against genocide. And so one of our team members just dropped all the partner organizations in the chat, so that way you can just keep following all the different orgs that are being that are working together here. And with that, I'm gonna hand it to Linda.
Hello, everyone. Salam alaikum. May peace and blessings be upon you. Thank you so much to all of our incredible partners who helped make today possible. I think oftentimes when we are working on a case and saying free our loved one, and we find out that they have been released from a detention center, a lot of that enthusiasm, a lot of the momentum, and a lot of the consistency and persistency that is required kind of goes away. And I think the importance of this conversation is to put Salah's case into context. What happened to Salah is happening to thousands of immigrants across the country. And this administration wants to set a precedent, a very bad precedent. And they are targeting specifically people like Salah, who are leaders in their community, who have been staunch advocates for the Palestinian people. And let's just be clear, Salah himself is Palestinian. And they tried as much as they could to hold Salah in detention. He was there for 81 days. He was held under outrageous conditions. He had to literally advocate and involve national organizations to get something as simple as a holy book as a Muslim. He was also oftentimes deprived of medication. I got to see Salah in person. I went to Wisconsin on Sunday. I was in Milwaukee with the incredible Milwaukee community, and I got to see Salah. I've known Salah for over 30 years, and he had was like a new guy. He had lost almost 30 pounds. So you could see the impact of the detention on Salah physically. Um, Fortunately, mentally, Salah came out with even more. I can't even describe how I felt being around him. He just came out with more fortitude. He was more focused. And in particular, kept talking about the people and friends that he made that he left behind at the Clay County Justice Center. This administration, it was not in their hands. This was not a decision that was made by Donald Trump or his administration. This was a decision made by a federal judge that Salah be released from detention in the meantime as he continues to fight a different case that's happening around his immigration status. So that just means that Salah is free for now to fight his case. And so what we want is full freedom for Salah. We want Salah to be able to live here freely in the United States of America without this cloud that follows him around that would allow for ICE to redetain him at any moment. One thing that I'll say to everyone here is that sometimes when we take the mantle for cases like someone like Salah, who has the privilege of being someone who is beloved and well known in his community, he's the president of the Islamic Center of Milwaukee, which is the largest Islamic center in the state of Wisconsin. He sits on boards of national organizations. He's one of the main convention organizers of the Palestine Convention that is organized by the American Muslims for Palestine each year. That's in Chicago. He has his hands in a lot of charity work, both locally and nationally and internationally. This is a man who has dedicated his entire career here in the United States, his entire adult life in the United States to serving others. And I want to give a special shout out to the Milwaukee community. You are literally the stalwart of what solidarity looks like. The way in which you have organized and mobilized your community to fight for Salah and to bring him home is inspirational and has been inspirational to us all over the country. I want to also specifically shout out our Jewish friends and particularly those who started Jews for Salah. We see you. We saw you go down to Indiana to the Clay County Detention Center. We saw groups like Bend the Arc, Jewish Action, Jewish Voice for Peace, other anti-Zionist organizations that banded together in Salah's name. And we see you. And solidarity for me has always been a verb. It requires action. It requires taking risk. It requires sometimes fighting for somebody that you do not know. And you embodied that. So I just want to say that I'm incredibly humbled by your solidarity. I'm incredibly inspired by the Milwaukee Muslim American community. When I went on Sunday, they had an event for Salah. And I don't know, I couldn't count how many people were in there, but it was at least 600 to 700 people, some of whom were our allies. And so just incredible to see how a community came together around this injustice. So today we're here to continue to demand that Salah stay free, someone who's a green card holder for more than 33 years. And someone who's a beloved father and grandfather. When I went on Sunday, and I've seen this or before Salah was detained, but just recently on Sunday, you should have saw his grandbabies. The little girls were literally hanging on to his legs like as he was walking, like those kids did not leave him alone. You can see how beloved he is by his grandbabies, by his family, by his community, and we want him to stay home. So we want everyone to know we're doing this power hour so that our members of Congress know that we have not forgotten, that we are not just going to move past this and act like Salah is free and there's nothing else that we can do. We need to tell our members of Congress, we need to make sure our leaders know that we want them to continue to monitor this case, to continue calling for the release of Salah and the many others that are like Salah that are literally languishing in detention centers, who are often owned by for-profit corporations. And sometimes when I sit and think that there are CEOs in this country that are literally making money, profiting off of the separation of our families, profiting off of the detaining our beloved fathers, brothers, sisters, mothers. It is absolutely outrageous on every single level. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for all the incredible work that you have done. I am so glad to see Salah home. I want him to stay home, but I also want to free them all. I want all those in languishing in for-profit detention centers. I mean, in any detention center, but in particular for-profit detention centers to be released back home to their families. So I'll pass it back to you, Ashraf.
Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing that. And again, for really sharing what it was like to see Salah over the weekend. And then also really just contextualizing that, hey, he's not alone in this and that this administration or this for-profit corporate system is targeting so many folks. And that Salah himself, I think what you had shared with me and what others had shared with me, Salah is not about what's happening to him. He's still trying to put his eyes on what's happening to other folks that are being kind of crushed in the system. So we appreciate that you are uplifting and sharing that. Cool. So I think now we'll transition over to Aya, a human rights activist and a scholar with American Muslims for Palestine, who's going to share a bit more about the landscape of what's happening around Palestine organizing in the U.S. And Zara, if you could pin her, then we're good to go.
Okay, shock. It's hard to go after Linda, who's my one of my biggest inspirations. But to follow her words, actually, Salah was not targeted because he's dangerous by any means, and I just really want to solidify that because that's how the media has attempted to paint him, and how that's how the administration has attempted to paint him. But he was targeted because he's effective, and they don't want you to understand that. He's obviously a respected community leader, and he represents something that those in power are increasingly fearing by the day, which is a growing movement that refuses to be silent about Palestinian rights and refuses to accept the status quo. For years, our movement and our community as Palestinians have been told that speaking about the Palestinian freedom struggle was politically toxic. And we were told that Americans would never support it. We were told that the conversation would never change. And we weren't just told this, we saw it for ourselves, right? Since the establishment of the Zionist entity, Americans have overwhelmingly aligned with Israel. But what I want us to do is step back a little bit and look at where we are today, because that can be a very daunting thought. Because so much has changed and the landscape has changed, and that's why we're talking about Salah today. Because recent polling shows a historic shift in American public opinion. According to Gallup and Pew surveys conducted in February and April of this year, 60% of Americans view Israel negatively, while 41% sympathize more with Palestinians compared to 36% who sympathize more with Israelis. And on top of that, support for Palestinian statehood has reached record highs, including amongst independents and a growing number of Republicans, which is huge. And this shift is being reflected in our current election cycle, which we saw last night. We've been seeing as primaries hit every state. We're seeing candidates who reject APAC money win races that political insiders insisted were unwinnable. Despite millions of dollars being spent to defeat them, voters are increasingly backing candidates willing to speak honestly about Palestinian rights and challenge unconditional US support for Israel, because they want authenticity. They want an authentic candidate. And the old formula of like flooding a race with money and making support for Palestine politically untouchable and hazardous is no longer delivering the results that it used to. That shift is also showing up beyond elections. It's showing up in the way that members of Congress who once refused to utter the word ceasefire just 2.5 years ago, almost three, are now introducing legislation. They're signing letters. They're publicly criticizing Israeli government's actions. And conversations that were once relegated to activist spaces are now happening everywhere. And what was once considered politically unthinkable to all of us, honestly, is now part of mainstream political debate. Um, we're also seeing unprecedented fractures within the political establishment itself. Over the last several weeks, even members of the Trump administration and prominent Republicans and Trump himself have publicly criticized the Israeli government in ways that would have been unimaginable. I want to say just a few years ago, but honestly, just a few weeks ago. Um, and whether those criticisms are sufficient is a totally different conversation, but the fact that they're happening at all reflects a changing political reality. And it's that the old consensus is completely breaking down. And while we're not seeing these changes be reflected in a tangible way that relieves the suffering of Palestinians on the ground in Gaza, in the West Bank, that ends the genocide on Gaza, that ends and constrains the settler colonial expansion within the West Bank and East Jerusalem, it does still mean something important. And I want you guys to remember that. And it's that the opposition is losing its ability to control the narrative. And when there is no merit to an argument, you're forced into an ad hominem attacks, changing the topic altogether. And that's exactly where Salah comes in, right? This isn't just about one man, like Ashaq and Linda both mentioned, but it's a part of a broader effort to criminalize, stigmatize, and intimidate people who challenge entrenched power, especially under a draconian administration like Trump's. And we've seen this playbook so many times in and outside of the Palestinian movement, in and outside the last few years, the last few decades, and again, since the establishment of the United States and the Israeli entity. And what happens is that first they come after organizations. For example, American Muslims for Palestine, which Salah is a founding board member of. Uh, and that's why they doubled down on attacks against him. I cannot count how many investigations, accusations, attacks, and attempts to destroy AMP there have been over the last few years and over it since its founding. Lawsuits, smear campaigns, calls for investigations, Senate hearings, endless attempts to portray advocacy for Palestinian rights as sinister or suspect, not to mention anti-Semitic. And time again, those efforts failed because these allegations are baseless. They continue to fail because they are baseless at their core. And that's the whole point. So when they couldn't stop the movement by attacking the message itself or the organization, they attack the messengers. When they couldn't stop the organizations from growing or they couldn't succeed in destroying them and shutting them down, they started targeting the people who built them. So the goal here isn't just to punish Salah himself, it's to send a message to me, to you, a message to every organizer, every activist, every immigrant, and any person who might be thinking about speaking out. And that message is you need to stay quiet. Don't you dare challenge power. Don't you dare question US policy. that has deeply entrenched the Zionist goal of occupying Palestinians, of ethnically cleansing Palestinians. Don't organize your community, and absolutely do not build institutions that can outlast political moments, which is what they're threatened by right now. But history has taught us that when governments begin targeting community leaders and movement builders, the issue no longer it's not just the immediate issue at hand that's targeted. And in this case, Palestine, it becomes an issue about whether dissent itself will be protected. And that's what this whole conversation is about. We are living through a moment where students have been investigated, professors have been targeted, protesters have been surveilled, organizations have been smeared, and immigrants have been detained and forced to self-deport quietly and loudly. And we've seen it happen across our own community, within the Palestinian American community, and across other communities. And the common thread here has been not criminal conduct. They're not being detained and arrested and deported because they've done anything that constitutes a criminal conduct. The common thread is constitutionally protected speech, which is under attack. It is the fact that we are bold enough to practice our First Amendment rights, to boycott, to protest, to say we are sick of this. We don't want our tax dollars funding the genocide of our people. We don't want to watch our people be massacred in real time on television, in the media, with our hard-earned money. And that's exactly why Salah's case matters far beyond the Palestinian community in the fight. And I think that's what all organizers will tell you, including Salah himself. This is beyond just the Palestinian movement, the Palestinian community, the Palestinian fight. Because if they can do this to a respected community leader whose only real crime is literally being an effective defender of human rights and justice, then nobody should immune that they're immune, especially if they're on the opposite spectrum of the administration, Palestinian or not, Muslim or not, pro-Palestine or not. The lesson of every single civil rights struggle in this country is that attacks that begin with one community rarely ever end there. And we've seen this. This didn't begin with Salah Sarsour. It didn't begin with Mahmoud Khalil or Liqa Kurdiya or Mohsen Mahdawi or Dr. Badr Khan Suri or Rumaysa Osterk last year. It started with people decades ago, including people from our movement, Palestinians that are still languishing behind bars in the United States of America for advocating for Palestinian rights. It started with civil rights, Black Power movement leaders that were organizing in the civil rights movement that were killed and detained and assassinated and died behind bars. And that's why fighting for Salah's freedom is about more than one person. It's about defending the right to organize, the right to dissent, and the right to tell the truth. Um, and the right of ordinary people to challenge powerful institutions without fear of retaliation, which is what's happening right now. Because if we allow people like Salah to be isolated, silenced, or disappeared from public life, which is what they're attempting to do, then we're losing a leader first, a dear leader to us, first and foremost. But it also means that we're surrendering the very freedoms that make democratic movements possible to begin with. It means we're surrendering our right to exist within a democracy, or quote unquote democracy. So the fact that they're targeting leaders like Salah is not evidence of our weakness. And I want to end on a good note because this can be very daunting and it can be very scary. And that's their goal, to overwhelm us, to beat us into silence out of intimidation. But this actually, in retrospect, as scary as it is, it's actually a win because they're realizing that it's evidence that they recognize our strength and they are vulnerable. This is an answer and of their weakness because failing movements don't get this kind of attention. Movements that are changing the political landscape drastically do. So our goal here is to keep Salah free and to keep fighting. And I'll end this off with the words of Salah himself upon being released last week. He said, I quote, "This experience is a reminder to all of us that we must fight together for our right to be a voice for the silenced. I will never stop speaking for Palestine and humanity wherever I am." End quote. And I encourage all of you, including myself and all of us within the movement and the grassroots space, to live by his words and continue to do the same.
I thank you so much for this kind of encapsulating and sharing, like, hey, what this means and what how we should be challenging our power structures and what it means for us to not to continue to take action and be able to kind of hold whatever powers that be accountable for what their unjust targeting. So right now, folks, we have Salah has an immigration hearing that's going on as we speak. One of somebody from his legal team is actually planning to join, and we'll just wanted to give us a quick update on what's happening there, and then we were just going to transition into the action. So I'm giving it about another minute or so for Munjid to come on board. And then once he's on, he'll share an update on what's happening real time on the ground, and then we'll transition into our call action.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So I was asked to just give a quick kind of idea of why I thought Salah was targeted. And a lot of that you'll see, for those of you who are inclined, you can see in the federal court. So there's two courts. There's the immigration court and there's the federal district court in Indiana. A lot of it is laid out pretty well in our filings in the federal district court in Indiana. And if you look even at the judge's order, which is a 29-page order relating to the bond issue, the judge kind of lays it out pretty well. And he explains that there's a substantial, in his words, a substantial argument that the reason that Salah was targeted was retaliatory because of his First Amendment speech. So in essence, our argument, which I think is very well supported by the facts and supported by the evidence, is that Salah was targeted for his advocacy for Palestine, much the same as Mahmoud Khalil and Rusmana Öztürk and Mohsen Mehdawi, Liqa Kurdi, and others. So the essence, that's kind of the essence of our claim, is that he's been a lawful permanent resident for more than 3 decades, and only when he became outspoken against the genocide in Gaza did this become an issue, and was he targeted. So really, the essence of our claim is that he had First Amendment. He used his First Amendment rights of speech. They didn't like that speech, they being the government, and so in order to silence him, as they did with others, they retaliated by weaponizing the immigration laws and immigration system, and that's essentially what's happening now. The judge agreed in federal court. The judge agreed that that was a substantial. He didn't come out and say for sure that's what happened, but he did say that there is a substantial argument to show that's what happened. So Salah was released based on the fact that the judge does believe that was a substantial reason for his detention in the first place. I mean, but we have to be clear, his case is far from over. We still are in the immigration world, in the immigration courts. For those of you who don't know, immigration courts are administrative in nature, and the judges are not like federal district judges, in that the federal district judges are lifetime appointments. So even if they decide something that the administration doesn't like, that doesn't really matter for their job security purposes. They move on. They continue to serve as federal district judges. Whereas in the immigration court, since it's an administrative court, and particularly since the judges are part of the DOJ, they are subject to firing from the administration, as we saw in Mohsen Mehdawi's case and Rusmana Öztürk's case. The judges that made the decisions in favor of those two were subsequently fired by the administration. That's where we are now. We still have the federal case. The writ of habeas is still in federal court in the Southern District of Indiana. But the crux, I guess, of Salah's case now has shifted from that district court to the immigration court. The judge currently sits in Kansas City, although the case is tabbed to the Chicago Immigration Court. So ultimately, that's where we are right now. We had a hearing today that was postponed. He has another hearing in late July in the immigration court, in which we are doing what's called a contested removal hearing, in that we're challenging the government on Salah's removability. We do not believe he should be removed or deported from the United States. Rather, we believe that he should be given his green card back and ultimately become a U.S. citizen. But it's going to be a long road for Salah. We still have a long way to go. I'll stop here. I don't know within the platform if there's some issues of questions or not. Um, I see that my dear sister Janan is asking about the hearing today. The hearing today was essentially postponed. Um, we asked for certain things. The judge agreed that our requests were reasonable. Ultimately, it took a while to get him to see the light, but he finally saw the light and he postponed as we requested. So he has now postponed it to I think it's July 26th. Just answering Janan's question.
Got it. Thank you so much, Munjat, for sharing that update and again giving a bit more context on the case surrounding Salah. I think in terms of the team that's supporting Salah both on the grassroots side and the advocacy side as well as the legal team, there's communication on what kind of the kind of next steps are. And I think for us, we saw that piece of that puzzle is continue to engage our elected officials as constituents, raise the alarm that that what's happening to Salah is not normal, it's not correct, and that it's happening to other folks that as Munjid mentioned, as Linda mentioned, as Aya mentioned, to other folks that are speaking out for Palestine or speaking out against genocide. So with that, oh, go right ahead, Munjid.
I'm sorry. I should just say one thing that's very interesting in the judge's decision on bond in the federal court, and I think that maybe we can piggyback off of this as we as activists fighting for all of these folks, Salah and Mahmoud and Liqaa and others, is that the judge said, look, this Marco Rubio determination had not been used for decades upon decades upon decades, and now is only used for four people. All of a sudden, it's only four people, and all four happen to be activists for Palestine. And so he did draw the link between how the administration is using the Rubio determination and how it's been used in the past, and how all of a sudden now it's only being used for Palestinian activists. So when you are talking to your elected officials, you can tell them that even a federal court, district court judge sees what's happening here, and that this isn't something normal. It's very abnormal. I'm sorry to interrupt.
And I appreciate, again, I think it helps us to kind of understand how we're kind of holding our elected officials accountable and by being able to kind of point out the irregularities and how this is not normal. So with that being said, we're actually towards the end of our power hour, and we wanted to share a few links and resources with folks on how to stay engaged. So I'm going to share my screen one more time, and the links are going to be dropped in the chat with y'all. Links have been shared. We appreciate y'all. We'll stay in touch. We'll close out with a closing supplication. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. All praise and thanks is for Allah. We turn to Him in repentance, and all praises for Him. We ask that He gives safety and relief to all political prisoners, regardless of their creed. We ask that Allah protect and God protect the innocent and protect the families and bless the folks that are doing the work on behalf of those that are being unlawfully detained. Thank you, everybody, and we'll share this recording as well. Assalamu alaikum.